Thank you very much.
Okay, we are live recording.
Okay. First, I want to thank Carol Rourke for single-handedly taking on the responsibility of keeping my father's memory alive. The article that you wrote, Carol, for the, what is it, the Handbook of Texas, is an incredible chronicle of my dad's life. And my sister is holding up a copy. I distributed copies of the article to the family this morning. It was published actually in 2020, October of 2020. So I'm a little late getting y'all's copies to you. I hope you'll forgive me. Before I get started, I want to introduce the family on the call. My three sisters, Marion Brooks Bryant of Lansing, Michigan, and Marie Brooks Washington of Durham, North Carolina, and San Francisco. She kind of bi-coastal right now. They've all joined me to help celebrate our father, whose birthday is coming up this coming Tuesday. Would be his 102nd birthday. And Carol, again, thank you for the birthday cake.
You have Subi Green for that birthday cake. I just came along with her to deliver it.
Roy, Jacqueline is here also.
Oh, yes,
Your
and
niece.
my niece, Jacqueline Bryant Campbell, who is my sister Marion's daughter, and is the family historian and genealogist, is also on the call. Hey, Jack. So, our father and grandfather was a multifaceted man. He was physician. He was civil rights and political leader. He was a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a mentor to generations who came after him. Let's start with a little background information. I don't know that each of you has read Carol's article. So let me tell you a little bit about the specifics of my dad's life. He was born February 15th, 1920, to Roy E. Brooks Sr. and Eula Mae Jackson Brooks. My grandfather, Roy E. Brooks Sr., was a railway postal clerk, which back in the 1920s, when my father was born, made him a decidedly middle-class Black man. Railroad postal clerk being a highly prized position, working for the federal government and working on the railroad, getting the mail from place to place. My dad graduated from historic I.M. Terrell High School, as did I and two of my sisters, both Marion and Carol. We're all I.M. Terrell graduates. Our mother was an I.M. Terrell graduate as well. Dad went on to Prairie View A&M. Well, it's now Prairie View A&M College. Back then it was Prairie View Industrial and Normal College. Now it's a full-fledged university under the A&M system. He got there at age 16. Graduated at age 20 and went on to teach school for a couple of years in Rosenberg, Texas, which is in Fort Bend County, down just south of Houston. The interesting thing about his teaching school was that some of his high school seniors were older than he was. And they were being drafted into the military. And he was not yet old enough to get drafted and go to World War II. He was finally drafted at the age of 22, entered the Army as a buck private, exited the Army as a first lieutenant, having served in World War II in the segregated Army of the United States of America, where he commanded a transportation, a trucking company. After the war, he married his childhood sweetheart, Marie Louise Norris. That happened on Christmas Day in 1945. And they quickly moved to Washington, D.C., where he became a typist for the Veterans Administration. My dad was the fastest typist that you ever saw on a manual typewriter. He typed about 90 words a minute on a manual typewriter. With the GI Bill and his part-time typing job at the VA, he paid his way through medical school. Had one child when he entered medical school, that's Marion Brooks Bryant. Had three more while he was in school. And the interesting thing about that is that mother had these children alternating between Fort Worth, between Washington, D.C., where Marion was born, to Fort Worth, where Carol was born, back to DC, where I was born, and then back to Fort Worth, where my brother, Dr. Clarence Brooks, who was called Jackie, was born. So I contend she spent most of my father's med school back and forth on the Jim Crow car of the train having these babies. And of course, Marie Brooks Washington was born after he graduated med school and moved the family back to Fort Worth. 4 kids in med school. And he still graduated number 5 in his class and served as president of his class 3 of the 4 years that he was in Howard University School of Medicine. Did his internship at Freedman's Hospital in Washington, D.C., now Howard University Hospital. Moved the family back to Fort Worth at the completion of his internship and set up his medical practice on 9th Street, which was the heart of the Black business district in downtown Fort Worth, somewhere around 9th and Jones. When he moved back to Fort Worth and set up his practice, what he found was that America's system of Jim Crow, which had been a constant in his life for all of his life, really impacted his ability to deliver effective health care to his patients. His dream all of his life was to become a physician and to make America better and healthier. But Jim Crow locked Black doctors out of the major hospitals in town. They could not gain staff privileges, nor could they admit patients there. All of my dad's patients were admitted to the colored ward in the basement of St. Joseph Hospital, where they received adequate care, but not excellent care. Separate is often far from equal. So he set about to change that system, and in the process ended up taking on all of Jim Crow as a leader of the civil rights movement. Ultimately, he was able to dismantle the segregated hospital system and set about dismantling the rest of Jim Crow by taking on the establishment. My dad always said that because he made his living off of his people, that he could do and say things that people who had a job could not do or say. And this was both a burden and a responsibility to him. He had to become a leader. He had to stand up for the rights of his people. At the same time, providing for his family, which had by this time grown to 5 kids, Marianne. This is where his partnership, where his wife came in. My dad loved him some Marie Norris Brooks. She was his partner in life and his partner in love. And their relationship in many ways was based upon a division of labor. He was the outwardly facing partner. He got the community, both in healthcare and in civil rights and partnership. Mother got the family. She raised 5 children who became remarkably successful individuals, considering the time which we grew up. I was the 3rd child, the middle child. And I graduated high school from a segregated high school, as did the 4th child, my brother Jackie. It was not until we got to the 5th child, Marie Ann, that the integration of schools that was decreed by the Supreme Court in 1954, the year after Marie Ann was born. It was not until she went to high school in, what, 1970, Maria? That, no, 71.
68. I graduated in 71.
You went to high school in 68, okay. All right. Went to high school in 68. Went to Pascal, graduated from Pascal.
In 71.
In 71, yeah. So mother was responsible for raising these 5 kids and for providing the support that my father needed to do the work that he did. Among many things that she did was to always have his dinner ready at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That was the time that he shut down the clinic for 2 hours to do hospital rounds. But on the front end of that, he stopped by the house, which was 3 blocks up the street, and had dinner with mother. We all ate, the 5 of us kids, when we got out of school. That was their time together during the day. So, practicing medicine. Dad was the social safety net, the medical safety net, before Medicare and Medicaid became law in the 60s. That was one of the best periods of his life, because under Medicare and Medicaid, he could finally get paid for all of the free care that he delivered to his patients. He always saw patients regardless of their ability to pay. He even did house calls to patients who needed to be in the hospital, but for whom there was no room in the hospital for them to receive the care that they needed. Over the course of his practice, he also did free athletic physicals to every boy. Girls didn't play sports back then. To every boy who wanted to play football, basketball, or run track. He probably did tens of thousands of free athletic physicals in his life. He delivered generations of Black babies. From the time he set up his practice in 1951 until the first Black OBGYN moved to town, probably in the 70s. When the first Black OBGYN moved to town, he never delivered another baby. Sent them all to the OBGYN. Dad had this overwhelming need to give back for the blessings that he had received in life. He always told us five, his kids, that we've been tremendously blessed in life and that we had an obligation to give back to the community that had so blessed us. One of his mantras was that service is the rent that you pay for the air that you breathe. And he drilled that into the heads of his five children so that we each understood that service was a family value and service was what was expected of us. Now, we've all served in different ways. There are many ways to serve. And I'm tempted to channel Dr. King, but I'm afraid I might not get it exactly right, but it goes something like this. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subjects and your verbs agree to serve. You don't have to be familiar with Einstein's theory of thermodynamics to serve. All you need is a heart generated by love and a soul full of grace. That may not be exactly right, but that gets you where Dr. King wanted you to be. My dad believed that with all his heart. And that was the basis for all of the public service that he did. He was recognized in many ways for his public service. He was one of the first 2 Black men appointed to City of Fort Worth boards. He was appointed to the Park Board, and Reverend C.A. Holliday was appointed to the Library Board. Same time, same year. I can remember one Sunday, shortly after his appointment to the Park Board, when he gathered up the 5 of us kids and his wife and put us in that big 9-passenger Mercury station wagon that Mother used to transport us. Took us down to the Botanic Gardens to show us one of the parks over which he held some responsibility. And strolling through the rose garden, he was taken aback when we came upon this deep, dark red rose, and the plaque in front of it named it Nigger Boy. Well, y'all may not have known my father, but you can guess that that sign did not stay in front of that rose for very long. He raised holy heck at the park board about that sign and about the experience of taking his children to a public rose garden and being confronted by that sign. We were young children at the time. I was probably 10 or 12, which would have made Brianne 7. But we knew the N word. We knew what it meant. We knew that it wasn't nice. That started out, can't you name that rose something else? He was told no, because that rose was grown by a particular grower, and that the name is patented, copyrighted with the rose. So where they ended up was taking the sign down, and the rose had no identity other than beautiful rose. Life is full of small battles. among my dad's public service was that he was involved in several organizations, including the McDonald YMCA. He was a founder of the Tarrant County Precinct Workers Council, which was a political organization that attempted to get rid of the poll tax and teach Black people how to vote and encourage them to vote. He was a founder of the Sickle Cell Disease Association, the first one in Texas. Sickle cell being a disease of the blood that primarily affects Black people. And he was president of the Urban League in Fort Worth until the good white people decided that the Urban League, which was established for the economic betterment of Black people, the good white people at the time decided that it was in fact a communist front organization, and convinced the United Fund to withdraw its financial support. The United Fund is now the United Way. And the organization collapsed. It was run out of town. He was the last president. He survived that without being accused of being a communist himself, which would have been the next logical step, but somehow they didn't go there. But Dad was always involved in politics, in progressive democratic politics. Heavily involved to the point where our home growing up was always full of politics. And at one point, he was even asked to run for lieutenant governor on some obscure, very progressive democratic platform. He declined, citing his wife and 5 kids that he had to do right by. But it was pretty well known in the Democratic Party that if you wanted to get elected, somehow you had to come talk to Dr. Brooks. In the civil rights movement, he led many demonstrations in Fort Worth. There was a Safeway store in our neighborhood right on Evans Avenue that would not hire Black people in the middle of a Black community. He set up picketing, and ultimately they started hiring people from the community. He also helped with the integration of Leonard Brothers department store. We could always shop there. but we couldn't always work there. So picketing ensued, and that policy was changed as well. August of 1963, when Dr. King led his march on Washington, my dad got together with a group of leaders in Texas, including a lawyer from Dallas, W.J. And they put together a march on Austin, which took 4 of 5 children to in 1963. And we marched from the Dory Miller Community Center in East Austin to whatever that park is that's adjacent to the governor's mansion. And fiery speeches were made in that park, loud enough to be heard in the governor's mansion next door. My dad made one of those speeches. He was a hellfire and brimstone kind of speaker, an orator of considerable note. And he let one fly that day. He didn't get the press coverage for his speech that Dr. King did for his I Have a Dream speech, but it was a stem winder, I can assure you. So we've covered medicine, civil rights, politics, a bit of the husband deal. But one thing I want to add to that is that my parents were married for almost 50 years when my father died. And one of his joys in life was to buy beautiful clothes for our mother. And he would take all of us kids on his Christmas shopping trip down to Wally Williams in downtown Fort Worth. I don't know whether any of you remember that store, but it was quite the place to buy elegant clothing. He dressed mother out of Wally Williams. And I think those trips to Wally Williams probably had a little bit to do with my sister Carol's career in retail. She became enamored with fashion. She had the taste among the children. As a father, we didn't get to see a lot of my dad because he was busy either making a living or taking care of the community in civil rights or politics. But the time that we did spend together, full of music and art and poetry and all of these wonderful things. Sunday at my parents' house when we were growing up was time for Dad to break out his substantial and eclectic record collection. Eclectic because it went from opera through jazz to gut bucket blues, and he loved them all. I can remember one of my favorite jazz numbers was Ella Fitzgerald doing How High the Moon at the Newport Jazz Festival. And that scatting part at the end, where she forgot the words and made up words to finish the song. And never missed a beat. That was truly amazing to me. But I loved especially jazz. Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington, Dakota State. Joe Williams was his favorite male singer. He loved the big bands, Duke, Count Basie. And we came to love those artists too, because they were part of the background music to our childhood. We went to church at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church, where Mother and Dad were married. But somewhere around 1960-ish, 61, 62, the bishop, the Black bishop, of the United Methodist Church. Back then, the Methodist Church had this creature called the central jurisdiction. That was all the Black Methodist churches. And we had our own bishop. Well, the bishop decided that it was time, since the population, the Black population was moving south towards the Morningside area, he decided we needed to plant a church in Morningside. So the Morningside United Methodist Church was formed in my parents' living room. And Dad taught Sunday school there. Taught the high school Sunday school class for 40 years. Mentored generations of kids through that Sunday school class. And one of those kids went on to be a minister in the United Methodist Church and actually preached, did the eulogy at my dad's funeral. One of his Sunday school kids. an impactful life. He was one heck of a grandfather. Sunday dinner at my parents' house. By the time the grandkids came along was, it was civics lesson, it was current events, it was radical politics. My dad having been a member of the Black Panther Party and having been their physician, can remember nights when he went off someplace, I'm told, into the woods and treated their wounds. But at any rate, that dinner table on Sunday was a place where the grandkids, there's one of them on this call, Jacqueline, cut their teeth on what it meant to be Black in America, what it meant to be excellent while Black in America, what it meant to grow and excel and think deep thoughts. And learn to serve, learn to give back. I fully recognize that my two children, who probably got to spend more time with their grandparents than many of the rest of the 10 grandkids of their generation, would be completely different human beings if not for the influence of their grandparents, who spent time with them and loved them and fed them and nurtured them. Each of the 10 had a special relationship with their grandparents. I'll probably just about run out of steam, Carol. You got anything you want to add?
Well, one thing I will note, you see this, you see the bow tie, folks? You see that dapper bow tie that Roy is wearing? Think about the picture that I sent of the dapper young man wearing the bow tie. I think there was a sartorial sense that passed from father to son, because I sent out a picture as or Susie Adams sent out a picture as a tease for your meeting about, do you know who this dapper young man is? And it was a picture of your father when he graduated from Howard Medical School in 1951, and he's wearing a very natty bow tie.
Yes, I remember his bow tie.
You remember that picture, yeah.
Carol, I was asking my sister Carol
Oh,
if she had anything to add.
You can introduce your son who has joined.
Oh, Marion. My son Marion, named for his grandfather, is a Wake Forest University undergrad and a University of Texas Law School grad, and is currently practicing entertainment law in the city of Austin, which has become quite the entertainment mecca. Son, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people. How's everyone doing? That was great. That I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You got anything to say about your granddaddy?
He was unique.
To say the least.
He was just, very funny, very curious about me, but also just about anything. I remember I started playing golf after Tiger Woods won the Masters in '97, and Granddaddy and I connected about that. Tiger being the first Black champion on the tour was very special to him, and we bonded over that, among many other things. I also worked at the clinic, like many in my family before me, learning the ropes and helping people out. It was my first job, so that was pretty cool. And Gran also did the books, so we all got to work together. And there's a million things. Sunday morning breakfast, and Christmases. It was good.
Jack. Jacqueline.
Hi, yes. Granddaddy was a character. When you were listing off the types of music, I noted you didn't mention Beatles and how he was known to walk around singing "If I Were a Rich Man" from Fiddler on the Roof, complete with all of the arm movement and everything. And that's a thing that I enjoy. Every time I hear that song, I think of him and not of Zero Mostel.
Carol.
I'm so glad we're having a chance to give our little colorful memories of him, because he really was quite a character. One of the things that I have never forgotten. So you talked about, Roy, how the Black doctors were the medical safety net and they treated everybody, whether they could pay or not. And things would show up in our home when we were kids that we had never seen before. The first time I ever saw a brown egg was because a patient of our father's had paid him with the eggs from the chickens that had just been laid that morning, and they were brown. We were city kids, kids' eggs were white and they came in a carton in the supermarket. People would bring him all kinds of produce, greens. The one thing that our mother was a very good cook, but the one thing she refused to cook was chitlins. It was all right for him to eat them in our home, but she was not going to cook those. And many of his patients knew that. So his birthday gift every year from several patients, he didn't get just one bucket. There were different size buckets of chitlins that were delivered at the clinic, and he would bring them home and gorge on the chitlins, and mother would cook the greens and the cornbread and the fried chicken for the rest of us. But the chitlins were supplied for his birthday every year by his patients. Homemade jelly, all kinds of things. That was what they had to contribute. And they took pride in paying their doctor with what they had. And it was always accepted, and we enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. Ms. May.
Hi.
Hi.
When you were talking about, you mentioned in passing the poetry. I remember him reciting by memory several poems with expression. He always told us to recite with expression. And the poem that I remember that was my favorite was The Creation by James Weldon Johnson. And he would recite that poem, and you could just see the imagery that he was conveying with his words. You could just see it in your mind's eye as he would recite it. And also the If by Rudyard Kipling, he recited that one, and that was one of my favorites as well. So I enjoyed that in addition to the music. And I remember participating in the demonstration at Safeway.
Yes, yes. Marianne.
Well, this has all been so serious. What I would like to end with is saying that our father loved a good party.
Oh, yes.
And he would dance wildly and unrecognizably to those of us who prided ourselves on the latest dance moves and everything. And he would throw his head back and quite often let out a scream because he was enjoying himself and the rest of us would cringe. But he just loved having fun and dancing to the music he loved with his wife in his arms, trying her best to follow him. And that was a good evening for him. So that's all I've got to say.
That's excellent. Thank you, Carol, and the rest of the group for giving us an opportunity as a family to get together and reminisce.
Well, and I would like to add, we have a chat comment from Lon Burnham, who said, I have to add my personal note. The first time I met Dr. Brooks was in May 1972. I was in total awe. At that time, he was serving as the treasurer of the Sissy Farenthold for governor campaign in Tarrant County. He was legendary, and there he was at this political rally. I mean, that's apparently your family has made such contributions to the advancement of a sense of equality in this community, and we cannot be thankful enough.
Well, let me comment that Sissy should have won. We was robbed.
Stop the steal.
Well, and I can tell you, I've written a book about slaves, and as a historian, I'm currently working on a book about a slave, and the story of trying to gain a sense of equality and a sense of being equal to all people in society is just an overwhelming task. And we're still struggling with that today. And I hope that in my lifetime, we will see some sense of equality across all racial and ethnic lines. It kills me to see the way that things happen today.
It is to be hoped.
So we have another comment that said, thank you very much for such a moving story about this outstanding individual. Your father made incredible contributions to the community, and we have to be thankful for what he had done.
Let me tell just one more story. The Tarrant County Public Health Building bears the name Dr. Marion J. Brooks. Now, many people think I had something to do with that. I knew nothing about it. This was a movement that was started by Billy Adams, who runs a shoe repair shop on East Lancaster and Oakland. He mentioned it to Glenn Lewis, former state legislator and current chair of the Board of Trustees at Texas Wesleyan. Billy said to Glenn, I want you to help me put together a petition to get that building named for Dr. Jack. And Glenn said, well, I'd be glad to help with that project, but petitions is not the way to get it done. Let me handle it and I'll get it done. So Glenn Lewis went to every member of the commissioner's court except me and got agreement to name that building in my dad's honor. I knew nothing about it until it appeared on the agenda for a vote.
Very cool.
Well, and that's the right thing to do. Absolutely. Are there any other comments? Carol Rourke, would you like to say anything else?
No, I've already asserted myself quite enough.
Carol, thank you so much.
We
Well,
thank you, Roy. Really
Commissioner
great.
Brooks, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts tonight. You know, I grew up in a small Southern community and I saw the racial divisions. I saw the Klan in action, and it just drove me crazy. Now, Brenda, you're raising your hand now, so please share.
Yes. Yes, I want to say real quickly how much Texas Wesleyan thanks Commissioner Brooks for his, not just his support of Wesleyan, but his friendship. Every event that I make, which is not that many, he is there. And I did one of the last 5K walks with him part of the way. So he is a real friend to Texas Wesleyan University. And thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Brenda.
Well, and if there are no other comments or questions tonight, I want to thank you so much for being a part of our program this evening. And we hope that you will continue to be a part of this organization because we support the work that you and your family have been doing. Our next program is scheduled for March 26th. It's a Saturday afternoon from 3 to 5 event. And one of the people who's been on the Zoom tonight, Brent Hyder, is going to do a tour restoring Fairview, the Bryce House, and he's going to give a tour of the house and he's going to offer comments. And then the last meeting of the year, and ostensibly my last meeting as president, will be June 5th of 2022 at the Colonial Country Club, and we'll have Claire Berry, who's talking about a case for conservation, preserving arts in Fort Worth. And it's been a real pleasure to be a part of this. And Commissioner Brooks, it seems like I spoke with you, God, this was probably well over a decade ago when I was the curator of history at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. And we were doing an exhibit on Fort Worth sports. I'm sorry. We were doing an exhibit on the streetcars of Fort Worth and where the streetcars went. And I think I came out and spoke with you. And I think I have about an hour and a half conversation somewhere recorded with you.
I remember that. And we talked about the interurban.
Absolutely.
And how
Yeah.
Stop 6 became to be known as Stop 6.
Stop 6, yes. Even though it was not, it was only the 6th stop for a short period of time. And then after that, it was the 8th and the 10th and you know,
Yeah,
a few more
well.
after that.
Progress. What are you gonna do?
That's right. That's right.
Listen, the first I ever heard of the Frenchman's fountain, the Frenchman's well, was tonight. Brent, Quentin, some of y'all need to talk to me about that well.
I'm putting together a kind of synopsis of its history. You will be the first one to get a copy of it.
Okay, good. I agree that Paddock Park is probably the best place to put it.
Fantastic. We need all the support we can get.
Absolutely.
Well, are there any other questions or comments this evening? Commissioner Brooks, you did an outstanding job, and I lament that I didn't grow up here in Fort Worth so that I could have participated in some of this story. My mom, actually, my grandmother, born in 1900, was actually born in Alvord, Texas, up near between Decatur and Wichita Falls. And she somehow got dragged out to Alabama by the man she married. And so my family more or less comes from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains of Alabama. But in any case, you know, thank you so much for what you've done. And I'm very envious of the contribution your family has made.
Well, thank you so much for having us this evening.
And if there are no further questions or comments, then I want to thank everyone for being here this evening.
Excuse me, I just say,
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
just say one thing. This is Brent Hyder. I just wanted to say I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in the society at Fairview on March 26th. I'm really looking forward to it. And I also want to thank Commissioner Brooks. I found everything he said spellbinding and absolutely fascinating. And it moved me when you told me the date of your father's birthday, February 15th, 1920. That coincides with the birthday of my father. So it's just a little.
Was your father Elton Hyder?
Yes.
Elton Hyder gave me one of my first political contributions when I ran for the state legislature in 1972.
Oh, well, he was a smart man.
Well, fantastic. See, we all have these connections that sometimes we just don't realize. And what we don't realize is how small the world is. And we just have to keep our eyes open so that we can see what the connections really are.
Amen.
So if there are no further questions or comments, I want to thank you for being here tonight. I hope to see many of you in March at Brent Hyder's. And if you are unable to make that event, hopefully we'll see you in June at the next. And we're hoping that it'll be a live event so that we can all shake hands and pat one another on the back and be thankful that we're all together again. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And if there's nothing else.
Dean,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Lawrence here. I would like to say, since you mentioned it, that if anyone is interested in Ron Tyler's program, more information is available at the Shander Gardens Foundation website, as well as tickets.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for reminding me.
Well, thank you for mentioning it.
And thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Thank you, Carol Rourke, for putting the program together. Thank you for the family of Commissioner Brooks. You know, I'm just very thankful that we're learning more and more about the more recent history of Tarrant County. So everyone have a pleasant evening, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.